Hi, I'm Maria Vitale, and I'm the Education Director for the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, an affiliate of National Right to Life. And I'm here today to discuss a few pro-life topics of interest with you. Our first topic is Kermit Gosnell. Now, if you were to sit down and write the script for a horror movie, you could not come up with something more horrific than what happened at Kermit Gosnell's West Philadelphia abortion facility, the Women's Medical Society. Gosnell and his unlicensed staff are charged with the murders of 7 newborn babies and 1 female patient. Now, in the case of baby boy A, the baby was moving and breathing when Gosnell snipped his spinal cord with scissors, killing him. Now, the baby weighed about 6 pounds, and Gosnell remarked he was big enough to walk him to the bus stop. In the case of the female patient, 41-year-old Karnamaya Mangar, she was an immigrant from Nepal, and she was given an overdose of an anesthetic. Gosnell could not revive her because his defibrillator was broken. And the paramedics could not get her out of the facility for 20 minutes because the hallways were so crowded and because the emergency exit had been padlocked. She died at the hospital the next day. Now, you might be wondering, how was this able to go on? Well, it was because state investigators ignored the 46 lawsuits that had been filed against Gosnell, and they only inspected his facility after a federal drug raid in 2010. It was the first time his facility had been inspected in 17 years. Now, you might be wondering, where was the pro-life movement during that time? Well, we were begging the Departments of Health and State to crack down on abortion facilities, but they wouldn't do it because of their pro-abortion stand. Now, Gosnell routinely violated the Pennsylvania Abortion Control Act, performing illegal late-term abortions. He also jeopardized the health of women by using unsterilized instruments, spreading venereal disease. He preyed upon the most vulnerable, the poor, the immigrant, women of color. Now, in light of this tragedy, pro-life Governor Tom Corbett in Pennsylvania has announced sweeping changes to the Departments of Health and State. For one thing, yearly inspections will be performed of abortion facilities, including unannounced inspections and inspections on the weekends. And the results of those inspections will be posted on the internet for everyone to see. For another thing, abortion facilities will be subject to the same complaint process as ambulatory surgical facilities and other medical facilities. Now, in addition to supporting Governor Tom Corbett in making these sweeping changes, the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation is lobbying hard for legislation to crack down on abortion facilities in our state. For one thing, we're supporting House Bill 574, which just passed the Pennsylvania House, and this would require that abortion facilities be subject to the same safety standards as ambulatory surgical facilities. House Bill 907 would increase the statute of limitations for late-term abortions and infanticide, while House Bill 908 would increase the penalties for impersonating a doctor. Now, after the latest round of inspections at abortion facilities, 2 abortion centers closed their doors, one in Bensalem, the other in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. And with additional inspections, we expect abortion facilities will be held accountable for their deeds. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the Gosnell situation, you can actually read the grand jury report via our website at paprolife.org. Now, in case you don't want to read the more than 260 pages of the grand jury report, you can read a synopsis on our website. Now, we know that every abortion is a tragedy, and every abortion center is really a house of horrors. But until we can make abortion illegal, we must have stricter scrutiny of abortion facilities. Our next topic is the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court is made up of 1 Chief Justice, John Roberts, and 8 Associate Justices, Samuel Alito, Stephen Breyer, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Elena Kagan, Anthony Kennedy, Antonin Scalia, Sonia Sotomayor, and Clarence Thomas. Now, under the 1973 U.S. Supreme Court ruling Roe v. Wade and its companion ruling Doe v. Bolton, abortion is legal for any reason during all 9 months of pregnancy. Now, under Roe and Doe, you can have restrictions after viability, in other words, after a baby can live outside the mother's womb. This brings us to a landmark piece of legislation, the Pennsylvania Abortion Control Act. This was passed back in 1989 and went to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1992. Under the Pennsylvania Abortion Control Act, abortion is illegal after 24 weeks, except basically to save the life of the mother. Now, under the Pennsylvania Abortion Control Act, we also have parental consent, meaning a parent, judge, or guardian must provide permission before a minor girl can obtain an abortion. We also have informed consent, meaning a woman must be told the risks of abortion and alternatives to abortion. And we have a 24-hour waiting period for abortion. Now, when the Pennsylvania Abortion Control Act was passed, the thought was that this would overturn Roe v. Wade. But unfortunately, back in 1992, we just didn't have the votes on the U.S. Supreme Court to do that. What's the situation today? Well, we're pretty sure Scalia and Thomas would vote to overturn Roe. We think that Roberts and Alito might vote to overturn Roe. But we're pretty sure Sotomayor and Kagan, the two justices appointed by President Barack Obama, would vote to uphold Roe. What this means is that at most we have 4 votes to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, we need at least 5 votes to overturn Roe, and some legal experts say we should really have more than that so we have a good cushion of victory. What this all means is that elections have consequences. We must have pro-life presidents who will appoint strict constructionists to the U.S. Supreme Court who will vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. We also need pro-life U.S. senators who will vote for these strict constructionist judges to confirm them. We also need pro-life judges on state Supreme Courts and lower courts. Now, if you're curious about the judicial stands of your judicial candidates, I would recommend you contact the National Right to Life affiliate in your area. In Pennsylvania, that's us, the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation. Now, I am confident Roe v. Wade can be overturned, but it's going to take a lot more work on our part. Given the current political realities, I don't think that Roe is going to be overturned tomorrow, but it can be overturned before we know it, and that's why we need to get ready. Now, our next topic is social media. As you know, social media has exploded in recent years, thanks to the popularity of Facebook and Twitter. Facebook has more than 600 million followers, and it's growing. Twitter has more than 200 million followers, and it's expanding too. The Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation and National Right to Life both have a strong presence on Facebook and Twitter, and you'll find a number of other National Right to Life affiliates also have that strong presence. They have fan pages, they have groups, and they have Twitter pages. Now, I would highly recommend that you connect with your National Right to Life affiliate via Facebook and Twitter. Why? Because you're going to see postings of important pro-life news stories, videos, and photos. You'll also see legislative alerts, which will tell you when you need to call your congressman or your state representative when there is an important vote coming up. I think there's also a less obvious way to use Facebook and Twitter for the pro-life cause. I have a colleague, Bryce McMinn, who's our Director of Development, and he regularly posts about the joys of fatherhood, and that's a very pro-life thing to do. The other thing that I would recommend is that you subscribe to the email newsletter of the National Right to Life affiliate in your area. For Pennsylvania, as I said, that's Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, and you can find us at paprolife.org, and you can subscribe to our newsletter there. I think it's also important that you expand your personal email lists. I know of a pro-lifer who has more than 600 pro-lifers on her email list, so that when she gets a legislative alert, she can send it out to hundreds of people, and they can in turn send it out to hundreds of people. So she's really expanding her reach that way. Now, the internet is a wonderful way to reach Generation Y, or the millennial generation. That's those young people born between the late 70s and the 90s. Research shows that they receive much of their information from the internet, so it's important that we're there on the internet to provide them with that information. If you like to write, I would suggest you start a blog. That's a web blog, and you can write about all sorts of things dealing with the pro-life issue. At the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, we have our own blog at blog.paprolife.org, and you'll find the top news stories there. Now, I think that when we embrace the internet, we're really embracing the unborn child, because that's how we're going to save lives. Now my final topic is one near and dear to my heart, how to deal with the news media. Now I was actually a card-carrying member of the news media. I used to have a membership card to the Ohio Radio TV Correspondents Association, and I worked in television, radio, and newspapers for about 12 years. And I can tell you from that experience that reporters seldom receive thank you notes. Now that might surprise you, but they don't. And I think that thank you notes are very, very important, and I'll tell you why. When I worked in radio, I received a thank you note from a woman from Cincinnati Right to Life. And I still remember to this day that thank you note was written on a little pink piece of paper. It was so important to me that I kept that thank you note in my desk for years. And that shows you the power of a thank you note. And in this age of email, it's very easy to write a thank you note to a reporter. And I would suggest you can write a thank you note even if you're not thrilled with every single thing in a news story. You can at least thank the reporter for the coverage and then gently point out the mistakes or misconceptions in the story. And I think you'll be surprised at the response you'll get back. Now, if you see a local television news story about the pro-life issue that has a mistake, I would encourage you to call the station immediately and ask to speak to the reporter. In this age of 24-hour news cycles, stories tend to get repeated over and over again, so it's important that we catch those mistakes early. Now, if you've ever been to any one of our conferences, you've heard us talk about the importance of writing letters to the editor. And I'm going to talk about that again now. Letters to the editor are extremely important. For one thing, they influence public opinion. People really do read the op-ed pages of their local newspapers. For another thing, letters to the editor influence public officials. If you write a letter to the editor about a local public official, I guarantee you that public official will find out about it. It's important that we commend our public officials when they vote the right way on issues and call them to task when they vote the wrong way. Now, I'll tell you a little secret to getting your letters to the editor published. Write them shorter than you want them to be. Newspapers love short letters to the editor because they don't take up much space and they don't have to edit them. So if you can make your point in 3 sentences, that's great. Once you've been writing letters to the editor for a while, you can graduate onto op-ed pieces. They're longer pieces, usually 500 to 600 words, and you can write them about your unique perspective. In other words, if you're a healthcare worker, you can write about how healthcare reform affects you. Or if you're an adoptive parent, you can write about how your life changed for the better as a result of adoption. Now, if you've ever gone to the March for Life, you know how important it is to get news media coverage. I think March for Life Day should be our Media Awareness Day. If you're boarding a bus for the March for Life, you really should contact your local news organizations and tell them exactly where and when you're boarding your bus. Local news organizations like to get that local angle to national news stories, and the March for Life can provide that. Now, if you're ever interviewed by a reporter, there are a couple of important things to keep in mind. For instance, you should come up with your sound bites ahead of time. Those are the interesting quotes you're going to use to make your point. If you come up with your sound bites ahead of time, chances are the reporter will use those sound bites because they're the most important things you have to say. Another important thing is to expect tough questions. No matter how amenable the reporter might be to our cause, reporters are trained to be the devil's advocate. So you should familiarize yourself with pro-abortion arguments. And you can actually find those arguments on our website at paprolife.org, along with good responses to those arguments. Now, I think when you're dealing with the news media, you should follow the philosophy of make a friend, be a friend, bring the friend to your events. If you establish a relationship with a reporter, chances are you can get fair coverage, and that's all we're really asking for. And I think that when you look at a pro-choice reporter, you should think of that person as a potential pro-lifer, because that's what I was. Thank you so very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you again.